A very good day to Madam Mariam and my fellow friends. Today, we're going to talk about a serious issues that happens in worldwide, which is child abuse. So before I start, please allow me to introduce my groupmates. First of all, we have Dwi Cahya Putri. Next, Zarin Nor Fariza, Nurin Syauqinna, and also me, myself, Liang. So I will now begin to our presentations. So what is child abuse? Child abuse is when a parent or a caregiver, whether through actions or failing to act, causes injury, death, emotional harm, or risk of serious harm to a child. There are many forms of child abuse, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, medical abuse, and also neglect. So for physical abuse, it occurs when the child is purposely physically injured or put at risk of harm by another person. Next, for sexual abuse, it occurs when an adult uses a child for sexual purpose or involves a child in sexual acts. It also includes when a child who is older or more powerful uses another child for sexual gratifications of excitement. Next, for emotional abuse is when a parent or a caregiver harms a child's mental and social development or causes severe emotional harm. It is considered emotional abuse. While a single incident may abuse, or most often emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior that causes damage over time. For medical abuse, it occurs when someone gives false information about illness in a child that requires medical attention, putting the child at a risk of injury and unnecessary medical. Lastly, we have neglect. Child neglect is when a parent or caregiver does not give the care, supervision, affections, and support needed for the child's health, safety, and well-being. In many cases, child abuse is done by someone the child knows and trusted, often a parent or other relative. And that's all from me. I'll pass it to the next presenter.
All right, so thank you, Liew. So now I'll be focusing on the causes of child abuse. So what actually causes child abuse? One of the main causes is domestic violence, in which the parents are just repeating the cycle of violence to their child, and also alcohol and drug abuse. So a parent would be unconscious when they are using the drug or alcohol, so they would inflict abuse their children. And when parents are stressed and when they also have untreated mental illness, they can also very likely abuse their own child. And parents who are actually lacking of parenting skills could have high likelihood of abusing their child, as they don't know what they are doing, either mentally or physically. So now we'll move on to the effects of child abuse on children. So we can see the effects either physically, mentally, or their behavior. So physical effects on a child, we can actually see visible bruises that is caused by the parents hitting their kids. We can also see sprains or broken bones when they are taken to the hospital. And if a child is sexually abused, you can also see bruises or bleeding in or around the genital or anal area. So now, on a mental perspective, a kid that grew up in a very abusive childhood can also grow up with either having anxiety or depression, as they are in a very abusive childhood, that they actually don't really feel like the world means anything because they are just abused. Then a kid will also grow up in very low self-esteem, and they have the difficulty in maintaining relationships because they are abused by their parents in either uh, very hurtful words, and they can also be in persistent fear. So they are actually scared of doing everything because their parents are just very hurtful with their words, or they hit them with the slightest mistake that they make. So, behavior wise, a child can very much self harm, so because they want to like have an escape, so they don't know what to do and they just harm themselves. They could also resort to alcohol and drug use as a form of escaping again, or they would highly be in criminal activity, because it's either them running away from home or them stealing, because just in a way to like express or run away from their problem. So how can we prevent this? So as a parent, you should actually be understanding and be aware of how your child is developing, because it could either be a you problem or the child problem, and you can actually find a way to properly deal with the problem. And then, as a parent, you should also be very careful with your words and your actions, because we don't want a kid to be abused. And you should always be aware with like what you're doing, and you should always control yourself before you hurt your child in any ways. So for others, we can actually raise more awareness about this issue, because this is not actually a well-known issue. So as the government, we should have better law enforcement towards this issue, and because this is not something to be taken very lightly of.
Now, moving on to the world scenario. Globally, it is estimated that up to 1 billion children aged 2 to 17 years have experienced physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect in the past year. Nearly a quarter of adults, or 22.6% worldwide, suffered physical abuse as a child. 36.3% experienced emotional abuse, and 16.3% experienced physical neglect, with no significant differences between boys and girls. However, the lifetime prevalence rate of childhood sexual abuse indicates more marked differences by sex, 18% for girls and 7.6% for boys. Next, I'll be talking about the symptoms. Symptoms of abuse vary depending partly on the nature and duration of abuse. The presence of bruises, injury marks, or burn marks which cannot be explained rationally is the symptoms of physical abuse. Next, changes in behavior are common signs of sexual abuse. Such changes may occur abruptly and may be extreme. Sexual abuse may also result in physical injuries. Children may have bruises, tears, or bleeding in areas around the genitals, anus, or mouth. As a result of the pain, difficulty while sitting or walking might happen. Lastly, children who are emotionally abused tend to be insecure and anxious about their attachments to other people because they have not had their needs met consistently. They might have low self-esteem too. As for the testing, if doctors suspect physical abuse, they usually take photographs of the external injuries, such as bruises. Doctors may also do imaging of the brain by CT scan or MRI. Sometimes, x-rays are taken to look for signs of previous injuries or bone fractures. If doctors suspect child has been sexually abused, they examine the child by collecting legal evidence of possible sexual contact, such as swabs of body fluids and skin surfaces. If the suspect if the suspected abuse occurred within 96 hours of arrival at a medical facility. Doctors also do tests for sexually transmitted diseases and, when appropriate, for pregnancy. Lastly, I will explain on the impact of this issue to the society. Firstly, child abuse increases rate of juvenile delinquency. This is because abused children tend to perform worse at school, running away, becoming violent with other children, and engaging in criminal behavior such as assault. They also experience a higher likelihood of drug and alcohol use and associated problems. Next, this issue also increases suicide rate. Children who have been abused for a long time may appear fearful and irritable. They may be depressed and anxious and have symptoms of post-traumatic stress. They are more likely to act in violent or suicidal ways. That's all from me. I'll pass it to the next presenter.
Alright, hi, I'm Zarin Nor Fariza, and I'll be talking about how this child abuse issue is handled in Malaysia. So each year, thousands of children in Malaysia are reported as victims of abuse and neglect. Child abuse occurs frequently in Malaysia, but it is still underreported just like in other parts of the world. In the past, the public as well as other related professionals, often perceive child abuse to be isolated cases rather than part of a widespread phenomenon. As a result, child abuse did not receive enough attention until the late 80s when a few high-profile abuse incidents of children were highlighted in the media. This acted as the catalyst in prompting the government to introduce the Child Protection Act in 1991. In addition, the one-stop crisis centers were set up in government hospitals around Malaysia beginning mid-1998, providing services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. The government also initiated a hotline, which was launched in April 1998 and is currently known as Liang Nor at 15999. Since the introduction of Child Protection Act 1991, doctors are subjected to mandatory reporting of any suspected child abuse case to the relevant authorities. In 2001, the Child Protection Act 1991 has been superseded by the Child Act 2001 in an attempt to deal more effectively with issues relating to children. There is mandatory reporting of all cases for suspected child abuse by doctors, family members, and childminders under the Child Act 2001. This data on reported child abuse are compiled annually, mainly by the Department of Social Welfare, PDRM, and various hospitals, and also several other agencies. The Ministry of Health has also developed a guideline for hospital management on child abuse and neglect by suspected child abuse and neglect teams, known as SCAN teams in hospitals, as well as the One-Stop Crisis Centers, OSCC, in emergency departments. Many abused children, in particular sexual abuse, do not disclose the matter to their parents, caretakers, or authorities. Data suggests that from the cases being reported, the abuse often comes from someone within a close relationship. So according to Department of Social Welfare data, there has been a steady increase of child abuse cases from 1998 to 2017. However, despite all these, current data about child abuse in Malaysia is still minimum and scarce, as it is hard to find the absolute numbers of the cases. We hope Malaysia can improve the method of handling child abuse cases in Malaysia for the near future. That's all from me. I'm going to pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Fariza. So to conclude about this, child abuse and neglect have a long-lasting impact on the child, their family, and the following generations. In order to protect children from this situation, it is necessary to develop preventive programs and to develop and enforce legal ramifications. You might not be sure of the abuse, but having a concern is enough. The authorities will look into things and find out if abuse is happening. It is better to report and have no abuse found than to not act on your concern while a child continues to be hurt. Never threaten a person or take the law into your own hands. Let the legal system do its work. Not all suspicions of child abuse turn out to be true, but all deserve serious attention and fast action. The earlier abuse is identified and stopped, the earlier medical care, therapy, and counseling can help the children and families to heal. So if you suspect abuse, speak out. If a child tells you about abuse, take it serious. All children deserve to be heard, protected, and helped. So that's all from us. Thank you.